Wednesday afternoon or evening or wherever in the world you are. I hope you're having a great start to your, and it's Thursday. What am I thinking? I'm so excited. I can't even keep track of my days anymore. So it is day 3 of our June marketing jumpstart, and we are talking all about how to empower your team to sell more. I think that's something that most of us, all of us, right, want to really know how to do in our practices, right? So we're going to be covering a lot of ground today. We're going to move very, very quickly. But as always, my goal is to make this very actionable content for you. So I'm really excited to dive right in today. So just to give you an overview of what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be talking about why it's so important to understand value and how that relates to empowering your team to sell more. We're going to be talking about who in your practice, whoops, getting ahead of myself, there we go, who in your practice should actually be handling sales. Is it someone? Is it everyone? Is it a certain person? So we're going to clarify that as well. We're going to talk a little bit about some phone handling best practices and some insights that I think can make a very tangible difference for your team. We're also going to be talking about how you gather more testimonials, right? Testimonials can really be some of your best salespeople. So we want to find out, how do we get more of those? When is the right time to ask for a testimonial? How do we go about doing that? So I'm going to cover that with you as well. And I think a topic that's very relevant for a lot of us is price objections. How do we cover price objections? How do we overcome them? How do we really, if we're selling a high ticket package or procedure, really convey it and really deal with it in such a way that patients aren't getting that sticker shock? So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and I'm really excited to dive right in. So first thing I want to talk about today as it relates to empowering your team to sell more is, if you want to sell effectively, it is incredibly important for your team to recognize the value they offer. So really, and we talked about this on day 1, I want to emphasize one more time what I call this benefit gap, right? There is, wherever your patient is currently, their current situation, how they look right now, and there is where they want to be, right? We aren't selling neurotoxin, we aren't selling laser packages, we aren't selling chemical peels, we are selling transformation. And it just so happens we have treatments and procedures that can get people there. As I've said before, patients buy on emotion and they justify their purchasing decisions with facts later on. So selling transformation and really speaking to emotion is a very, very key approach when it comes time to help your team sell more. So we need to emphasize that it really is all about conveying transformation and value and getting the worth of that expressed eloquently to the patient who's considering becoming, a client of your practice. So very, very important to understand that you're selling transformation. Another thing that's really important to understand is, I think a lot of people find sales to be an icky word or a gross word, or they don't like selling, or they don't like feeling like they're at a used car dealership and trying to hawk cars, right? So a lot of people are very uncomfortable around this whole idea of sales. And I would love to really challenge that belief on today's conversation, because ultimately sales is about becoming a solutions provider, right? That's all we're doing for people. Sales is education. We are educating people about the solutions we have to give them that transformation that they're ultimately looking for. So that's the first distinction I want to make. The second distinction I want to make is, when you think about it, sales and marketing really, but especially sales, is really a form of service. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the thing is, people are looking for what you have to offer, whether it's invasive in the plastic surgery realm, whether it's non-invasive in the med spa realm. People are looking for what you have to offer. And if you aren't able to effectively convey the value you provide and bring them to a decision to get the quality of service you offer, they're going to ultimately still be looking and go somewhere that's going to offer them an inferior experience and probably an inferior patient outcome. So if you're not effectively marketing your practice and you're not effectively selling to close as many patients as possible, you're actually doing a really big disservice to those individuals who are going to go somewhere else and not be as happy. So sales really is the ultimate form of service for your patients and prospective patients alike. So I really want you all to remember that as we go through some of these gems of wisdom I'm going to be sharing with you today. So the question is, who should handle sales in the practice? Is it someone? Is it everyone? I'd like to share a quote with all of you that I think is so, so powerful. And this is from Helen Keller, who is, just such a testament to the human spirit. She said, "Alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much." And I think that's an incredibly powerful analogy for what my real orientation is as far as who should be selling in the practice. And my vision is every single person, whether they are working at the reception desk, whether they are an esthetician, whether they are a physician's assistant, whether they are the physician itself, every member of the practice ultimately needs to become a solutions provider, right? Everyone ultimately needs to put the patient's best interest first. And the way we do that is by offering them the most comprehensive range of treatments and solutions possible to get them to that outcome they're looking for, right? So everyone needs to be a solutions provider. Everyone needs to understand they play a role in the sales process, and everyone needs to be having conversations to educate your patients. So the question is, who sells? The answer is everyone in their own way. Now, a closely related activity about empowering your team to work in their best capacity is what I call unique abilities. So, those of you watching the replay or those of you who are live with me today, I would really encourage you to make a quadrant either in your mind or if you have a pen and paper handy, be sure to make this little quadrant and we're going to divide it into 4 areas. And those 4 areas are going to be unique ability, excellence, competence, and incompetence. And I'm going to walk you through all 4 of these and what they mean. And then I would encourage you, once you understand all of them, to jot down a few ideas about what you do really, really well and what, activities in your standard day or in the past week you've done that fall into which category. So let's dive right in. So, unique ability, these are the things that you do better than anyone else in your practice, and you really enjoy them. You would pretty much do them all day for free if you could, right? They bring you passion, they bring you energy. These are things that you just absolutely love. And try as they might, no one else in the practice can do these particular things quite as well as you can. So, that is unique ability, right? You love them, they give you passion. You would do them all day for free if you could, and you do them far better, or at least somewhat better, than anyone else in the practice. No one else on your team does them quite like you. That's unique ability. To the right of that, we have excellence. Now, excellence are things that you are very, very good at, and you may even be known for them, right? So they're things that you're good at, and you may even be known for how good you are at them, but they don't bring you any passion. You find them quite tedious, even if you are very skilled at them, right? After a day of doing these things, you are absolutely drained, right? And although you are very, very good at them, ultimately your skill set in this area has kind of peaked, right? You're very, very adept at it, but your skill set isn't necessarily growing in this capacity. Whereas with something that's a unique ability, the more you do it, the better you evolve and get better at it as your career progresses. So excellence are, again, things you're good at, things you're maybe even known for, but they don't bring you passion. You find them quite exhausting. And as far as your skill set is concerned, you've kind of come to a halt. So that's excellence. Now, looking at the bottom 2 quadrants, on the left, we have competence. Competence, the best way I can describe this to you is that it would be like a left-handed person doing a right-handed person's job and vice versa, right? So you are certainly capable of doing them. You can, but ultimately these are things you're doing because they fall on your plate and you do them less efficiently than someone else on your team could, and you may not do them as well as someone else on your team could, right? So it's, again, almost like that right-handed person doing a job made for a left-handed person, right? It can get done, but it's going to take longer and it's not going to be done as well as someone who really excels in this area. So that's competence. Finally, we have incompetence. And these are things that fall on your plate, but you may not really be good at all. They just got delegated to you, right? So this could be things like your bookkeeping or, running your IT when it breaks down, anything like that, right? Things that fall on your plate, but that you aren't good at and that you don't enjoy and that someone else should really be doing. These are things of incompetence, right? Now, the reason it's so important to jot all of these down and the reason it relates to empowering your team to sell more is our goal for every practice is as you grow, we really want you and each member of your team to be working in their areas of unique ability about 80% of the time. Because ultimately, when you're not working in your area of your unique ability, you probably aren't bringing revenue into the practice because you're working outside of your core competency. And when you work outside of your core competency, that's time taken away from what you could be doing best, right? So not only can you not generate revenue when you're not working in your unique ability, but when you're not working in your unique ability, you also cost the practice money in the sense that it's not what you do best. It's not that activity that you do that brings revenue in. So you're stuck doing a lower level task, right? So as this relates to sales, you may want to have, even though everyone is going to be a solutions provider and everyone is going to be having conversations with patients, you may want to have one or two people, maybe several members of your team, who are really the advocates for sales, right? Maybe some of you have a patient care coordinator. Maybe some of you have an operations manager who handles this, but find those individuals on your team for whom a unique ability really is, in fact, selling. And those of you on the line who are physicians that are currently either in solo practice or a smaller team, when it comes to selling, I long term would encourage you to find someone other than yourself to handle the majority of your conversion and your sales. Now, you will always be educating patients. That goes without saying. But our goal for you as a physician is really to be the patient's advocate, right? You want to advocate for that individual's best interest. And when you are the person who's responsible for selling, that almost jeopardizes your position as the patient's advocate, right? So when it comes time to have that money conversation, that compromises your role as the patient's advocate. So it may be that in your practice right now, you do all or some of the sales conversations and some of the consultation selling, but ultimately, we want you to be the patient's advocate. We want you to educate them about the procedure. We want you to educate them about complications. We want you to educate them about outcomes. But when it comes time to close that patient or to talk about, the money side of things, you may eventually, and as soon as possible, really want to look to delegate that to another member of your team or bring someone on board your team who can do that. Because again, in my personal opinion, that kind of jeopardizes your role as the advocate of that patient. So this is unique ability, and having every member of your practice team complete this exercise, I would encourage you to have all of them rewatch the replay when we send this out to everyone. That's going to really help you build out your team as you hire more people and really understand where you should be allocating your staff resources such that everyone is working in their area to bring revenue into the practice. Although, again, everyone should see themselves as a solutions provider and everyone should be having educational conversations with your patients that drive sales. So that's unique ability in a nutshell. Now, taking it a step further about what we want your team to be doing, or you to be doing if you're in solo practice, I really do want to impart a few key sales skills as it pertains to phone handling. So let's dive right in. I want to start with some statistics, actually. About only 34% of the calls made to medical practices are actually sent to voicemail. 7 out of 10 or so are actually handled by an individual at the reception area of a practice, right? Now, of those 34% who are sent to voicemail, only about 37% of those. So that's 37% of that 34% will actually leave a voicemail. So ultimately, you need to realize that losing leads due to missed calls is a really big deal because not only are you losing those prospective patients who probably won't leave a message and will end up calling a competitor, but when you lose them, you lose all of their repeat business and you lose all of their referrals. So, not to be negative, but one lost lead over the phone is a really, really big deal and could possibly cost your practice tens, if not even hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost revenue over the lifetime of that patient relationship, right? So phone answering is very, very important for that key reason. So there's really 5 kind of elements, I would say, that go into an engaging phone interaction. And you really want to make sure you address all of them or your front desk staff address all of them when you're dealing with patients inquiring about your services. So the first is, of course, a greeting, right? And, I don't really like these very generic, canned, kind of emotionless greetings, right? You always want your front desk staff to introduce themselves by name. You want them to ask who they have the pleasure of speaking with, right? There's no sound psychologically that's sweeter to us than our own names. So when we call someone by name, it just treats them like a person and not a number you're trying to get on the schedule, right? So always remember there is a person on the other end of your phone conversations, right? Very, very important to remember that. The next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that they get their initial questions answered. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, what about pricing? I'm going to get there in a moment. Don't worry. But you want to make sure they have their initial questions answered, right? How did you hear about us? What are you interested in? What concerns do you have, right? Now, remember, in any sales conversation, whoever asks the questions has control of the conversation, right? So you want to make sure that your front desk staff is the individual on that conversation and asking the questions, and they're not just answering, inquiry after inquiry after inquiry from someone who won't let them get a word in. And I'm going to give you a strategy in a few minutes of how you deal with those people on the phone that won't stop asking you or your front desk staff questions. But asking questions to really build rapport is very, very important. What's next in the really engaging phone conversation is transitioning them, right? So, really moving them towards having a date on the calendar for a consultation, ideally, right? So, how we transition them are things like, would you like to look at some availabilities, or were there any other questions I could answer for you, or when is most convenient for you to come in? So, transition phrases are really, really important once you've built that rapport. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to attempt to close them on a consultation. And remember, all you are selling, and I'm going to mention this in my next slide on a call with a prospective patient, is you are selling, a consultation time, and you are selling that their initial concerns can be put at ease. You are not selling the procedure on that initial phone call. That ultimately is what's going to be done in the consultation room. So whoever's handling sales in your practice can actually build the value and really demonstrate the value that goes behind your treatment and procedure fees. So you want to attempt to close them, but only on a consultation time and having their concerns addressed, and not the actual consultation, or I'm sorry, not the actual procedure itself. Now, I don't want any of you listening to this to let people on the phone kind of run free with your calendar, right? Right. They don't just get to, declare, I want to come in Tuesday at 4 o'clock. No, you want to do what we call, the double close, or, kind of giving them some options within boundaries, right? So, for example, you look at the empty spaces on your calendar and you would say, great, so does Tuesday or Thursday work better for you? Okay, Thursday. So does evening or afternoon work better for you? Okay, afternoon. So I have a 12 noon and I have a 3:15 p.m., right? So you always want to give them choices, but it's choices within the boundaries of your calendar. So that way they feel like they've had choice, they feel like they're heard, but again, you're still doing it on your terms and based on the availabilities in your schedule. Otherwise, as you all know, your timetable for the week can look very frenetic if people are just running amok, making consultations whenever they please. The fifth element that's really important is you always want to gather someone's contact information on a call. You can do it at the beginning or the end, depending what feels right to whoever you have answering the front desk phones in your practice, right? So they can get the data at the beginning or the end. I generally tend to prefer the beginning of the call, but that really boils down to personal preference. And you want to get their phone number, of course. You want to get their email information, and really make sure that way you say, we'd love to send you more information about this procedure. What's your best email? Or, we'd love to share some exclusive offers with you. What's your best email? Now, we want to obviously make sure we get consent to market to people, so we're spam compliant, but you don't ever want someone to hang up without getting their contact details and how to stay in touch. So that's very, very important. So once we keep that in mind, people say, should we script people? Should we, let them run free with what they say on the phone? I do like scripted calls, but I find the word script is very, very limiting and constraining. So I prefer the idea of a framework, right? Now, we don't need to script people's calls. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself again. My slides. Let me get back to where I was. Perfect. Okay, scripting, yes. So, like I said with scripting, I prefer to say a framework because I find that much less constricting. And we don't need to give people word for word what to say, but we want to make sure they're following a sequential process whenever they happen to be on the phone with a prospective patient, right? And that is actually very freeing. And the reason for that is when we have a set procedure and protocol for people to follow on the phone, they can focus their energy and their mental efforts on building a relationship with that patient and really building rapport with that patient, right? But when people are left thinking, how are we going to get them to close? What should I say? How do I talk about this? It's very, very chaotic, and they can barely even focus on the other person because they're too worried in their minds about what they're going to do next to get that person to come in. So when you actually provide your staff with a script, or as I like to call it, a framework to follow, it actually gives them an incredible amount of freedom. So I would highly encourage you, if you're not already, to really provide your staff with a framework to follow for every prospective caller who comes into the practice. So really, really a big advocate for set processes because ultimately random actions are going to get you random results. Now, there are what I call trigger words, and I want to walk you through these because these are things that generally, whenever you or your staff say them, people kind of tense up and stop listening to anything else you have to say, right? So, one word I don't like is cost, right? I would rather you talk about things as far as investment or procedure fee or price point. Those are conveying the same information, but in a much more positive and neutral way that doesn't have that idea of cost associated with it. So that's one trigger word to avoid. Another word to avoid is downtime, right? We can talk about recovery. We can talk about the post treatment phase. We can talk about the healing process. But when people think downtime, mixing up my words, they automatically think that they are going to be off work, that they're going to be stuck on the sofa or bedridden, they're going to be in pain. So people generally kind of don't like the word downtime and are open to receiving that information, but position it as the recovery after a procedure or the healing process or the post-treatment phase. Try and avoid that word downtime wherever you can. And of course, the third word I don't like is pain, right? And so if you need to talk about a procedure, especially on the phone before someone's come in for a consultation, you want to talk about it in terms of, it's a sensation or you'll feel heat or there might be some discomfort. Again, I put a star next to that word because I think you should use it sparingly, but just try and avoid the word pain. Now, of course, the one area you always want to be incredibly transparent and upfront with your prospective patients is when it comes time to talk about possible risks or complications of any procedure. That is not a time to sugarcoat things. We want to be transparent with our patients. So those are just some trigger words I would encourage you to have all of your staff avoid in their conversations with prospective patients, whether it's in practice, in the consultation room, or whether it's on the phone. So just some words there I would say, try to, nix out of your vocabulary to the best of your ability. And like I said, all we're selling on that initial phone call is putting the patient's initial concerns at ease and a consultation time, not the procedure. I generally am not very fond of giving prices over the phone. And the reason for that is people then can automatically assume, oh, that's out of my budget, or oh, that seems really cheap, or okay, let's go for it, right? They make that assumption before they've met your staff, before they've seen your practice, before they understand your skills and the approach you bring to the table, before they understand the value behind your procedure fees. So if someone is really, really, kind of dead set on a number, I would encourage you to give them a broad range, right? And explain that, your business is not a fast food restaurant. You can't just pick something off a menu, right? A physician has to actually, examine you, understand your unique concerns, and appropriately advise you from there, right? If someone wants to be treated like a number, they can go to another practice. But ultimately, we're in the business of helping people get the best results and feel better and look their best. So that's what I would say when it comes time to discuss pricing, explaining to them that you are not a fast food restaurant and really providing them with a broad range so they at least get a number in their mind and they're put at ease. But they understand that if they want the most accurate quote possible, it only goes without saying that a doctor has to really, take a look at them and examine them and determine the best treatment plan for their aesthetic concerns. So just a few little things to remember there. So let's talk about testimonials for a moment, because ultimately you and your staff can talk about how great your practice is until you are blue in the face, but it will never, ever, ever, ever be as effective as a third party endorsement from an existing patient. So the perfect time to get testimonials, I like to say, is what I call during the honeymoon, right? And you'll hear this happen, especially your estheticians and people who are in the treatment room with patients will hear this all the time, right? Oh, wow, my skin looks amazing. Or, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is me. Or, you've taken 10 years off, whatever the case happens to be. The moment someone gives you a positive piece of feedback or testimonial, what you want to say to them is, wow, thank you so much for sharing that. That means a lot to us. We would actually love more patients just like you. Would you be so kind to share that with us in writing, right? And of course, being fully cognizant of HIPAA regulations and all the, different, really parameters we have in your jurisdiction where you do business. We want to get as much social proof as we possibly can, because ultimately it becomes your best salesperson. And so whenever a patient says something nice to a staff member, ask that patient if they'd feel comfortable writing it down, right? They don't have to give their name if they don't want to, but just sharing their experience. That is an incredibly powerful way to gather many testimonials. You can also, at your front desk, as someone is checking out, have a business card sized piece of collateral ready with instructions on how they can leave reviews on Google or Yelp or Facebook or whatever platform you're really looking to use to maximize your review exposure. But again, the perfect time to get it is whenever they say something nice, and as I like to say, during that honeymoon. So moving on from testimonials, moving on from how we handle the phone, how do we really overcome price objections, right? We all get them. We often trip up on them, but there are several ways we've found with our clients that are incredibly effective to handle price objections. So first, I want to explain what a price objection is. And it really means one of three things is happening. The patient doesn't recognize the value you're offering. It means the benefit to the patient isn't strong enough or communicated clearly, or it means that what you're offering is not differentiated enough. Often it can be some combination of all three of these things, right? So this is generally what price objections really mean to people. So we always want to say, what's behind that objection? What is actually bothering that patient? Why is this price objection coming up? And again, it usually means they don't see the value. It means that the benefit isn't clearly articulated, or what you're offering isn't differentiated enough. So these are usually the three reasons we come up against price objections. So understanding all of that, how do we actually overcome them, right? So I want to give you a few approaches you and your staff can use to really open up the conversation with patients and get to the bottom of what's bringing that price objection about, right? So the first thing is just very kindly asking them, okay, so just so I understand for, our reference, what about this treatment seems too expensive to you, right? And this is really going to open up the conversation and help you understand where they do or where they don't see the value. And if they don't see the value, it's a perfect way for them to really have you explain the credentials you and your staff offer, explain what makes your practice unique, and explain the expertise you're providing them, right? So this question, asking them, well, what about this seems too expensive, is a really great way to open up the opportunity to do some really good patient education. So that would be my first recommendation. My second recommendation would be weighing price against outcome and asking them, okay, so I understand this is expensive for you. Is your priority, the ultimate outcome of this treatment, or is price your main priority right now? And there's not a right or wrong answer to that question, right? If they say outcome is their number one priority, okay, great. So maybe that will let you open up the conversation to discuss what kind of financing options you offer, or amortizing the cost of that treatment, right? For example, if results of a certain treatment last 18 months, we can break the investment in this package down over 18 months. And it's actually a very affordable treatment when you look at it, right? So that's one opportunity this question presents to you. If they say price is your number one concern, no problem, right? That's the perfect opportunity to downsell them, right? Whether you have a more affordable treatment, whether you have some kind of topical skincare that can get them, somewhere, towards the result they want, right? It also allows you to downsell them. And from a psychological standpoint, nobody really wants to be seen as price sensitive. So ultimately, it's going to kind of open up their perception of being, transparent with you about what their concerns are. So that's a really nice question to ask as well. Just asking if their priority is right now price, or if right now their priority is final outcome. And ultimately, that's not a question there's a right or wrong answer to. It's all about opening up the conversation. Another approach I really like is just asking them, very transparently. So if we were to set the price for this treatment aside, is this the procedure that you're interested in, taking price out of the equation? And if the answer is yes, then it's a perfect opportunity to introduce financing. It's a perfect opportunity to introduce the price versus outcome approach, like we talked about previously. And it's also an opportunity to say that, maybe they're not the right patient for you, right? If they don't want what you have to offer, it's not a good use of your time or theirs. So just asking, if we were to set price aside, is this the treatment you want? So that's another really nice question to ask as well. Now, like I said earlier, we all get those patients who ask us a million different questions, right? How much does it cost, and what's the downtime, and who's going to be doing the treatment? And they're trying to get all this information out of your staff on the phone. The best way to deal with people like that is, again, going back to this idea that in any sales context, whoever asks the questions is the person controlling the conversation. So have your staff acknowledge their question, like, that's a great question, right? And then the key here is, I would love to tell you more about it. Do you have a pen and paper handy? So the real magic of asking that particular question is that is then going to put the prospect on the other end of that conversation in the mode to receive information and stop asking questions, right? So it neutralizes them constantly asking questions. It also affords you the opportunity to take back control of that call and have your staff member or yourself be the one who is then asking the questions, right? So again, asking if they have a pen and paper handy is a perfect opportunity to neutralize their questions, put them in the mode to receive information, and then let you take control of that conversation once again. So this is also a very, very nice approach I like to use. And that's for those people who just keep asking question after question after question. So give that a try. Great. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. Like I said, we had very limited time, but I wanted to make sure these were some very actionable insights you can use to begin really empowering your team to sell more by realizing sales as service, by working in their area of unique ability, by realizing everyone in the practice is a solutions provider, by giving you some key elements of every really engaging phone interaction that they should be using every time they speak with someone on the phone. And again, by giving them some really nice opportunities and some really nice approaches to elegantly handle price objections. So I hope this was useful content for you. I would love to take a moment for those of you who might be live with us and answer any questions you might have. Awesome. And if you have no questions, you can always feel free to, like I always say, oh, I see someone's typing. I think it might be Sarah who's live with us. Do you offer alternatives with pricing? So great question, Sarah. Just to make sure I understand what you're asking, are you referring to offering patient payment plans? So generally, you always want to give them, in my personal opinion, give them a price per treatment and then give them a price for the actual procedure package itself. And then be sure to mention we can offer this from as low as, and that's a perfect opportunity to introduce Alphaon or Care Credit or whatever you may offer, or Green Sky, whatever you may offer in the way of patient financing. So you always want to be transparent, but you want to offer, as low as, and then help them understand that's where, Green Sky financing or Care Credit or whatever you offer comes into play. So there's not any one right or wrong way to offer alternatives, but you always do want to offer alternatives to someone. You can also do what I call a good, better, best approach if you're able to create a treatment plan for that patient. And that means, you can offer them a good approach, right? We can start here, we can start here, or we can start here, right? Good, better, and best, right? Each at a different price point, if that is something that will get them to their desired outcome, right? Again, this is going to depend a little bit on what the procedure, they're considering is, right? But I'm just giving you some different approaches. So I would definitely always provide some alternatives, right? And like I said, if it comes time to downsell them, that price versus outcome question is a perfect way to then do that, as is asking if it's what they really want. Because the thing is, if it's what they really want, there's any number of ways we can offer that to them, right? And patient financing is one of the best alternatives to do it. So to answer your question, you always want to propose alternatives, right? And that's a great way to also reduce some of that sticker shock. I mean, I'll give you an example. We have a client in Bay Area, and they are only a cool sculpting practice. That's the only thing they do. And they will never tell someone, oh, hey, it's $20,000 right out of the gate, right? They'll explain to someone, it's going to be this much per cycle. This is how many cycles you're going to need on each treatment area. This is the treatment area that you're going to, the number of treatment areas you're going to need. So, right, seeing, X dollars per cycle, or as low as X per month with patient financing, that's much more approachable in the mind of a prospective patient than seeing some big outrageous number right out of the gate, right? So you want to be transparent and give them that full number when it comes time to tally them up for their treatment plan, but you always want to present alternatives. So I hope that's helpful. Awesome. Sarah, I'm so glad you liked this webinar. Awesome, awesome. So that's everything I wanted to cover today. As always, those of you who haven't gotten a copy yet, I have a complimentary copy of my book. It's the digital edition. You can get that at www.getadamsbook.com. That book is Now the Patient Will See You. It's going to cover everything we've covered in these webinars and so much more. So I highly encourage all of you to get that digital copy. And again, I want to invite you to join us tomorrow, same time and place. We're going to be talking all about how we can discover your most profitable patients. And a little spoiler alert for you, it's not anyone with wrinkles in a checkbook. There's a little bit more to it than that. So we're going to cover why we want to know who your most profitable patients are, how to profile them, and how to really maximize that in all of the marketing we do. So this is a very, very important and very content heavy topic. So something I'm really excited to dive in with you to discuss in greater detail. And again, that's going to be tomorrow, Friday, June 21st, same time and same place. So as always, thank you so much for your time today. If any questions pop up, we've all been given invites to the Facebook group, so you can join us there. We're going to send out that invite once more in the email. We'll be sending out the replay shortly, and you have my email for any questions. I look forward to chatting with you then, and I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday. Thanks so much, everyone.